Sure, here's a short yet powerful hook for your story. She told me, don't leave. But I knew the truth. The day she cheated, she already walked away. Wanted a bit softer or more dramatic. It was the kind of late afternoon light that softens edges and blurs the line between what was real and what we wish could be. The cafe was quiet, tucked away on a side street, with dust motes dancing lazily in the sunbeams that slipped through the tall windows. I sat by the window, fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee cup, trying to steady the nervous flutter in my chest. Then she appeared. There was a moment when the world seemed to hold its breath. Her silhouette framed by the golden light, graceful, poised, and unmistakably familiar. The years had done little to dim her presence. Her hair, streaked now with silver but still catching the light like a dark river, fell softly around her shoulders. Her eyes, though tired, still held that quiet confidence that had drawn me to her once. She moved with the calm assurance of someone who had lived through storms and learned how to dance in the rain. Our eyes met across the room, and I felt a strange mix of warmth and hesitation twist in my gut. So many things lay unsaid, tangled in the silence that stretched between us. I wanted to stand, to close the distance, but my hands felt frozen, trembling just enough that the coffee rippled. When she finally took a step forward, it was slow, careful, as if she, too, feared what this moment might bring. She slid into the seat opposite me with the faintest smile, a flicker of nervousness betraying her usual composure. The scent of her perfume reached me before she spoke, a delicate mix of jasmine and something earthier, like rain-soaked wood. It was a scent I hadn't forgotten, one that pulled at memories I thought were buried. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of quiet conversation around us faded in the background, and all I could hear was the steady, uneven rhythm of my own heartbeat. Her fingers rested lightly on the edge of the table, and I reached out, barely brushing the back of her hand with mine. The touch was electric, soft, tentative, and it sent a shiver up my spine. It was a promise and a question all at once. She looked down, then back up at me, her eyes searching mine for something, forgiveness, maybe, or understanding. The years apart felt like a chasm we weren't sure we could cross. Yet in that fragile, suspended moment there was a spark, a quiet hope that perhaps this wasn't the end of our story. I swallowed hard, trying to steady the lump in my throat. The ache of the past, the sting of betrayal, all seemed distant for a second, replaced by the simple truth of being near her again. The late afternoon sun warmed my face, but it was the fragile warmth between us, the unspoken possibility of what could still be, that kept me rooted in place. The quiet return had begun, and for the first time in a long time, I dared to wonder if maybe, just maybe, some things were worth fighting for. The air between us was heavy, weighted down by the quiet echoes of everything we'd left unsaid. We sat across from each other in that same small cafe, where the world outside bustled on oblivious to the fragile moment unfolding inside. The faint murmur of other patrons, the soft clatter of cups and spoons, it all seemed distant, as if we were trapped in a bubble where only our shared history existed. She spoke first, her voice low and measured, careful not to break the fragile calm. "I never meant for it to happen," she said, almost as if confessing to herself. Her eyes dropped to the worn surface of the table, fingers tracing the faint scratches like a way to ground herself in the present. There was a vulnerability there, a crack in her usually composed exterior that I hadn't seen before. I wanted to reach across the space between us, to close the distance with a touch, but I hesitated. Instead, I kept my hands folded in front of me, fighting the urge to pull her closer. The memory of that day, the betrayal, was a shadow that lingered too close to the surface. It wasn't just the act itself, but the way it shattered something I'd thought was unbreakable. Her gaze flicked up briefly, meeting mine with a mix of remorse and something harder to name, regret, maybe, or desperation. "I was scared," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Of losing you, of losing myself." The confession hung between us, fragile and raw. The faint scent of her perfume had softened since the last time I saw her, but it still pulled at me, a bittersweet reminder of what was lost and what might still be. I caught the smallest quiver in her lips, a hesitation that mirrored my own. The years apart hadn't erased the way she made my heart race or the quiet ache of what we once shared. For a moment, our hands hovered near each other on the table, her fingertips grazing the rough wood, mine clenched in silent conflict. The nearly touch felt electric, a painful reminder of the closeness we had once taken for granted. The world outside continued, indifferent to the storm of emotions inside that small room. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to speak, my voice steadier than I felt. "Why now?" I asked, my eyes searching hers for a reason beyond regret. She looked down again, the silence stretching between us like a fragile thread ready to snap. "Because I don't want to lose you again," she said softly. "I'm tired of running from what happened." Her words stirred something deep inside me, a mixture of sorrow, longing, and cautious hope. I wanted to believe her, wanted to reach past the pain and find the woman I'd fallen for. But trust wasn't something that healed overnight. It was a slow, tentative thing, fragile and easily broken. As we sat there, the quiet tension between us thickened, charged with the ghosts of our past. The coffee cooled untouched, forgotten as the weight of our shared history settled around us. And in that charged silence, I realized that whatever came next, this conversation was the first step towards something neither of us could yet name. The quiet hum of the cafe faded into the background as we sat across from each other, the space between us heavy with memories I wasn't sure I wanted to revisit. Her eyes, those same eyes that once made the world feel simpler, now held a softness tinged with something unspoken, regret, maybe, or a quiet apology. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, the spoon clinking gently against the ceramic cup. "I never meant for it to happen," she said, voice barely above a whisper, fragile like the thin porcelain in her hands. Her gaze dropped to the surface of the table, fingers tracing an invisible pattern on the wood. For a moment, she seemed distant, as if reliving a moment she wished she could erase. I watched her closely, noticing how the lines around her eyes had deepened, lines carved by years of laughter and sorrow, by moments both shared and shattered. The weight of what she said settled between us, stirring a mixture of anger and something softer, a reluctant understanding. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gulf that had opened between us, but fear held my hand still. Her perfume lingered in the air, a subtle blend of jasmine and something earthier now, as if life itself had changed the scent. It tugged at something inside me, memories of evenings spent wrapped in her warmth, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat syncing with mine. And yet, beneath that familiarity was a sharp ache, the reminder that the trust we once had been fractured. She glanced up, eyes meeting mine with a flicker of vulnerability. "I was scared," she admitted, voice trembling just enough to betray the strength she tried to hold. "Scared of losing you, scared of losing myself in the silence between us." Her confession was raw, stripping away the wall she had built. I felt the tight knot of resentment in my chest loosen, replaced by a cautious tenderness. We both carried scars, some visible, some buried deep, marks left by choices neither of us could undo. Our hands rested on the table, inches apart but hesitant. Her fingers twitched, brushing against the grain of the wood, while mine curled into a loose fist, torn between wanting to close the distance and fearing the sting of more pain. The unspoken tension crackled in the stillness. Every breath we took filled with the weight of what had been and what might still be. I swallowed hard, voice hoarse when I finally spoke. "Why come back now?" The question hung in the air, raw and urgent. She met my gaze steadily this time, the courage flickering back into her eyes. "Because I'm done running from the truth. I don't want to lose you again, not without trying." The room seemed to hold its breath as I processed her words. The years apart had not healed all wounds, but in that moment, I felt the fragile possibility of forgiveness flicker between us. The past was a shadow we couldn't escape, but maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to define our future. The coffee cooled forgotten between us as the distance began to shrink, not with words, but with the quiet understanding settling softly in the space where pain and hope intertwined. The air outside had turned crisp, the early chill of autumn wrapping around us like a gentle reminder that change was never far away. We found ourselves walking side by side along a quiet, leaf-strewn path beneath the amber glow of a fading sun. The world was slowing down, trees swaying softly, the scent of dry leaves and earth rising with each breath, and for a while that simple rhythm felt like a fragile peace. Yet, beneath the calm surface, I could feel the delicate thread of tension stretching taut between us, as if the slightest misstep might snap it entirely. Every glance she stole, every pause in our conversation, was layered with hesitation. We were navigating uncharted territory, two people shaped by time, pain, and the heavy weight of what had come before. She walked with a quiet grace, her posture steady but not unguarded. I noticed the way her fingers occasionally curled around the strap of her bag, a small gesture betraying a nervous energy she didn't voice. The way her breath caught slightly when a gust of wind tugged at her scarf reminded me just how human she was. Strong, yes, but not immune to vulnerability. I kept my hands loose at my sides, afraid to reach out too soon, yet desperate to close the gap. When her foot caught on a hidden stone, I instinctively moved closer, steadying her with a light touch to her arm. My fingers lingered just a moment longer than necessary, the warmth of her skin beneath my palm grounding me in the moment. It was a wordless promise. I'm here. I haven't left. She glanced up, eyes meeting mine briefly, a flicker of surprise softening into something tender. The subtle exchange sent a quiet thrill through me, a reminder that despite everything, connection still flickered beneath the surface. But there was also caution, an unspoken agreement that trust needed time to rebuild, like glass mended with invisible glue, beautiful but fragile. Words felt heavy between us, so we spoke little, letting the silence carry the weight of emotions too complex for speech. I could feel her presence beside me, the steady rhythm of her footsteps, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the crisp air, and it was enough for now. Sometimes, healing began not with declarations, but with shared spaces and simple acts of closeness. As we reached a small bench nestled beneath a canopy of trees, we sat down carefully, shoulders nearly touching but not quite. The space between us hummed with possibility and fear. She shifted slightly, her hand brushing against mine, a soft, accidental graze that made my heart hitch. The warmth of that fleeting contact lingered long after our fingers parted. I wanted to tell her how much I missed this, the quiet companionship, the easy proximity. But the words caught in my throat, tangled with memories of betrayal and the guarded walls I'd built around my heart. Instead, I settled for a soft smile, hoping it spoke louder than anything I could say. In that fragile moment, I realized that healing was a journey without shortcuts. We were beginning to cross the fragile boundaries of doubt and pain, step by step, breath by breath, willing to face whatever lay ahead together. The sky was painted in shades of lavender and deepening blue as twilight settled around us, casting a soft, almost sacred glow over the quiet park where we had found ourselves. The world felt hushed, as if holding its breath to witness the fragile moments unfolding between us. The last traces of sunlight slipped behind the horizon, leaving behind a cool breeze that stirred the fallen leaves at our feet. We sat close on a weathered wooden bench, neither rushing to fill the silence. Instead, the space between us pulsed with unspoken truths and fragile hopes. The gentle rustle of trees whispered around us, carrying away the weight of the day and inviting honesty to take its place. I turned toward her, searching her face in the dim light. Her eyes held the kind of vulnerability that only comes from bearing one's soul, raw and unguarded. The lines of worry softened as she took a slow breath, gathering the courage to speak. "I never stopped thinking about you," she confessed, voice trembling just enough to reveal the depth beneath the words. Not a day went by that I didn't feel the weight of what I did. Her hands rested lightly in her lap, fingers intertwining nervously. I reached out, gently covering hers with mine. The touch was tender, grounding us both. Her skin was cool beneath my warmth, but the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat beneath my palm was a reassurance neither of us dared voice aloud. I was so afraid, she continued, of being left behind, of losing myself in the silence between us. I thought distance would protect me, but all it did was make me feel more alone. Her words resonated with the ache I'd carried inside me, loneliness wrapped in regret, longing, and the cruel sting of betrayal. I swallowed hard, my voice barely more than a whisper as I answered, I never stopped hoping you'd come back. But hope isn't enough when trust is broken. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and I felt a sudden urge to pull her close, to let her know without words that some wounds could still heal. Slowly, I traced a fingertip along her cheek, careful not to rush the fragile moment. The softness of her skin beneath my touch sent a ripple of warmth through me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the possibility of forgiveness flicker between us. The fading light caught the delicate curve of her jaw and the gentle rise and fall of her breath. The cool air mingled with the faint scent of her perfume, a comforting mix of jasmine and earth, grounding me in the present even as memories threatened to overwhelm. For a while, we sat in silence, letting the quiet wrap around us like a balm. The world beyond the park seemed distant and unimportant compared to the fragile bridge we were beginning to rebuild between us. I don't know if we can erase the past, she whispered, but maybe we can learn to carry it differently, together. Her words lingered in the twilight air, a promise and a challenge. And in that shared moment of honesty and vulnerability, something shifted, a quiet hope that, despite everything, love could find its way back, that we found ourselves sitting side by side on a worn park bench, the evening air wrapping around us with a cool, gentle embrace. The sky overhead had darkened to a deep indigo, punctuated by the first scattered stars that blinked quietly above. Around us, the world had grown still. Only the soft rustle of leaves and distant city murmurs punctuated the silence. It was a quiet moment, but beneath it simmered a tension so delicate it could shatter with the slightest touch. Her shoulder brushed against mine, a mere whisper of contact, but it sent a shiver through me, a subtle electric current that traveled down my spine and settled deep in my chest. The faint warmth of her presence was almost tangible, and I found myself holding my breath, caught between the desire to reach out and the fear of crossing a fragile line. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, the motion slow and unguarded. I watched her fingers brush against her cheek, soft and deliberate, as if trying to calm the flutter of nerves I could see flickering in her eyes. The glow from a nearby street lamp cast a golden halo around her silhouette, highlighting the gentle curve of her jaw and the tender vulnerability in her gaze. Neither of us spoke. Words felt too loud, too urgent for a moment so suspended in time. Instead, we communicated in glances and small gestures, the way her eyes met mine and lingered just long enough to ignite the unspoken, the way my fingers itched to trace the delicate line of her hand resting near mine on the bench. Her breath hitched softly, and my heart clenched. I wanted to bridge the space between us, to close the distance and let her know, without words, how deeply I ached for this, to feel the warmth of her skin against mine, to hold her hand and never let go. But hesitation held me back, a whisper of doubt seeded by past wounds and the fragile trust we were still weaving together. A gentle breeze stirred the fallen leaves at our feet, swirling around us like a quiet dance. The scent of earth and fading autumn flowers mingled with the subtle trace of her perfume, grounding me in the present even as my thoughts threatened to pull me into memories of what we had lost. Her hand twitched slightly, brushing against mine in a moment so fleeting it could have been imagined. But I felt it, sharp and electric, an invitation and a question all at once. I turned my palm upward slowly, barely daring to hope, and she hesitated for a heartbeat before letting her fingers fall softly into mine. The warmth of her skin against mine was immediate and real, a small but profound bridge across the distance that had grown between us. My thumb traced a gentle circle on the back of her hand, slow and steady, as if to reassure both of us that this moment, this fragile, beautiful moment, was ours to hold. We sat there in silence, the quiet of the night wrapping around us like a protective cocoon. No words were needed. The closeness, the gentle touches, the lingering looks, they said everything we hadn't yet found the courage to voice. In that stillness, I realized that the moment before, the fragile, trembling space between doubt and desire, was perhaps the most honest place we could be. The evening had settled into a quiet stillness, the kind that feels like the world itself is holding its breath. We stood facing each other beneath the muted glow of a street lamp, its soft light casting long shadows that flickered gently on the pavement. Everything else, the distant hum of cars, the rustle of leaves, faded into a background hum, leaving only us and the fragile tension suspended between our words. She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears and a vulnerability she no longer tried to hide. "Don't leave," she said softly, her voice barely louder than the whisper of the wind through the trees. The plea hung in the air, raw, honest, impossible to ignore. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The weight of her words pressed against my chest, stirring memories too painful to revisit and hopes too fragile to fully embrace. Then, slowly, I met her gaze and said the truth that had shadowed every moment since she left me, the truth I'd held close but never voiced aloud. "You left first, the day you cheated." The silence that followed was thick, almost unbearable. Her eyes glistened as she absorbed the sting of those words, but instead of pulling away, she took a tentative step closer. The space between us shrank, but the distance carved by pain and betrayal was still palpable. I reached out slowly, my fingers trembling as they brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. The touch was reverent, soft as a whisper, gentle as a prayer. Her skin was cool beneath my fingertips, but beneath that surface, I felt the rapid thrum of her heartbeat, a quiet rhythm that mirrored the wild pulse racing through my own veins. Her breath caught, and I could see the conflict flicker in her eyes, remorse, hope, fear. It was as if every word, spoken and unspoken between us, had distilled into this fragile moment of connection, trembling on the edge of what could be and what might never fully heal. Slowly, I cupped her cheek, the warmth of my palm grounding us both. She leaned into the touch, her eyelids fluttering closed, as if trusting me to hold the fragments of her heart carefully without breaking them further. The scent of her perfume, soft jasmine with a hint of earth, wrapped around me like a memory come alive. "I don't expect things to be easy," I whispered, voice rough with emotion. "But I'm here. If you're willing to try, so am I." Her lips parted in a small, tentative smile, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice fragile but honest. "But I want to believe in us again." The tension between us began to ease, replaced by a warmth that felt like the first rays of sunlight after a long, dark night. We stood there, hands entwined, the promise of healing suspended in the gentle press of our fingers. In that moment, the past wasn't erased, its weight still lingered, but it no longer held us captive. Instead, it became the foundation we could build upon, imperfect but real. Choosing to stay meant embracing that complexity, trusting in the slow, steady work of love and forgiveness. And so, beneath the quiet glow of the street lamp, we made our choice, fragile, uncertain, but filled with a hope that neither of us had dared to speak aloud until now. Time had softened the sharp edges of our past, not by erasing the scars, but by weaving them gently into the fabric of who we were becoming. The early days of tentative steps and fragile trust had given way to moments of quiet comfort and shared laughter. We were learning to hold each other without fear, learning, slowly, how to be whole again together. One afternoon, As the sunlight filtered softly through the window of her small apartment, I found myself sitting close beside her on the couch. The warmth of the late spring air drifted in through the open window, carrying with it the scent of blooming jasmine and freshly cut grass. Her hand found mine without a word, fingers weaving effortlessly into mine, as if they'd known the shape of each other's touch all along. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her breath warm and steady against the side of my neck. The gentle rhythm of her heartbeat beneath her delicate cheek was like a quiet reassurance, steady, real, and present. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the softness of that closeness settle deep inside me, a balm to the wounds that had once felt too raw to bear. Our conversations were no longer weighed down by hesitation or fear. We spoke honestly, sharing hopes and doubts, fears and dreams, without the heavy silence that once stretched between us like an unbridgeable gap. There was a new kind of intimacy in this openness, a connection that grew from shared vulnerability and respect. Sometimes, when words felt too much or too little, we communicated through touch, a lingering hand on a bare arm, the gentle brushing of hair behind her ear, a soft squeeze of the fingers when one of us needed reassurance. Each gesture was a quiet promise, a way of saying, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with shades of pink and gold, we sat together on the balcony, wrapped in a shared blanket. The cool breeze tangled through her hair, and I reached out to tuck it softly behind her ear. She smiled, that slow, knowing smile that spoke of healing and hope. "It's not perfect," she said softly, her voice warm against the fading light. "But it's ours." I nodded, heart full. The past, the mistakes, the pain, had shaped us, but they no longer defined us. Instead, they had given way to something real and lasting, a slow-burning love built on patience, forgiveness, and a deep understanding of each other's imperfections. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, I pulled her close, feeling the steady beat of her heart against mine. In that moment, everything else faded, the regrets, the doubts, the fears. All that mattered was the quiet strength of being together, here and now. We had found our way back, not by forgetting the past, but by choosing to carry it gently, side by side. And in that shared journey of healing, we discovered the true meaning of love, patient, kind, and enduring.